We had you booked here to talk about your Senate candidacy, but let's begin with this breaking news tonight on your committee, the House Intelligence Committee. What is your reaction to this breaking news that the Trump administration and both Trump attorneys general pursued investigations of Adam Schiff, his staff, another member of the committee, and even the child of one of the staff members?
Well, Lawrence, it's good to be back with you. And let me just say this. It is absolutely outrageous, but not really surprising. As someone who serves on committees with jurisdiction, who has investigated the former president, certainly served as an impeachment manager, it is not surprising. But I ask you to think about, as a former police chief, imagine if I used my position as a police chief to investigate my political rivals. What we're dealing with is a former president who has no regard for the rule of law, no regard for the people who enforce the laws, and no regard for the people in Congress who provide the necessary oversight. He's lawless, and we need to conduct, as we've heard earlier from Adam and from my friend Raja, we need to conduct a thorough investigation and hold everybody who is responsible for this accountable. If that means cleaning house in the Department of Justice, then that is exactly what we need to do.
Let's listen to the way Chairman Schiff put that to Rachel in the previous hour.
In terms of the oversight by Congress, I don't think I have a role in that, given that some of my records were apparently the subject of a subpoena. But I think other committees, as part of their oversight responsibilities, ought to ask the Attorney General and others. And I do think the department needs to do a wholesale review of the politicization of these cases over the last 4 years.
And, of course, Speaker Pelosi issued a statement in the last few minutes supporting Chairman Schiff on exactly that, calling for an investigation.
The Speaker's absolutely right. I mean, it's just every time you think that we've heard it all involving the former administration and the Attorney General, the former Attorney General, there's always more to come. But this, Lawrence, is outrageous. It's very disappointing. America should be angry about it. And we have an obligation to get to the bottom of it. And we will.
I want to get to something else that's an urgent import in Washington to investigate, and that, of course, is the invasion of the Capitol on January 6th. Let's listen to what FBI Director Wray said today in response to a question from you.
Anytime there is a successful attack, much less an attack of the kind of scale and significance that occurred on January 6th, you can be absolutely sure that we are asking what else we can do, what we can do better, what we can do more of, what we can do differently in terms of collecting information, analyzing it, and disseminating. I'm not aware of information that we didn't share that we should have. I am concerned that we need to get better and better at developing human sources to be able to anticipate acts like this in the future.
Where are we as of tonight in our understanding of what happened on January 6th, and what more do we need to do?
Well, Lawrence, you know, look, I have the utmost respect for Christopher Wray, but I really wish he would have talked about what actions he and other law enforcement organizations and others, the administration and others, could have taken to prevent the attack. I believe that as a nation, we failed law enforcement, we failed members of Congress, even those who were scrambling for their lives and now say it wasn't that big of a deal. We failed our staffers. We failed the vice president and his staff. And so my question to Director Wray was, obviously there was a failure that day. And what role did the FBI play in that failure? So we still have a lot of questions. Of course, the independent commission would help us get to the bottom of it. You know where we are with that. Matter of fact, the person that I am running against voted against that commission. But again, just like the abuse of power from the former president, we are going to get to the bottom of this. The independent commission, I think, would be the best way to do it. But we are not going to let this go away. The American people are not going to let it go away.
Running for Senate in Florida, you're not just going to be running against Marco Rubio. You're going to be running against Donald Trump, who will be attacking you, presumably every day of the campaign. How do you plan to deal with what will be those two fronts, the candidate you're running against on the ballot and the former president attacking you every day?
Lawrence, Florida is my home. And in my announcement video, I talked about growing up poor, black, and female in the South. I will never run away from a tough fight. I served, as you well know, 27 years at the Orlando Police Department. I have never run away from a tough fight. But my opponent is someone who runs away from every fight. Any way the wind blows politically, it is cool with him. Florida can do better, and we will do better. And if there are those who are listening who would like to take this journey with me and get engaged in this fight, I would just ask them to visit my website at valdemings.com.